Deep inside a cave in France, on a soft clay ceiling far from the entrance, there are markings, wavy lines traced by human fingers more than 13,000 years ago. For a long time, people assumed these were the work of mysterious adult artists, perhaps shamans, performing solemn rituals in the dark. But when researchers studied the marks closely, measuring the width and spacing of the finger traces, they made a surprising and delightful discovery. Many of them were made by children. Small children, some perhaps as young as 2 or 3 years old, running their little fingers across the soft cave walls. And because some of these marks are high up on the ceiling, the children must have been lifted, held up on the shoulders of an adult so they could reach. Picture that for a moment. A parent, 13,000 years ago, deep in a flickering, torchlit cave, hoisting a toddler onto their shoulders so the child could draw on the ceiling. It is one of the most tender and human images imaginable, and it opens a window onto a question we rarely ask about the deep past. What was it actually like to be a child in the Stone Age? Today, we are going to meet the children of prehistory, the smallest and most overlooked people of the ancient world. When we picture the Stone Age, we almost always imagine adults, powerful hunters facing down mammoths, skilled artisans chipping stone tools, wise elders by the fire. We rarely picture the children, and yet children were everywhere. In any living human community, a large portion of the group is young. The Stone Age world was full of babies, toddlers, kids, and teenagers, growing, playing, learning, and exploring, just as children do today. The problem is that children are nearly invisible in the archaeological record. They left behind few grand monuments and few famous artifacts. Their small bones are fragile and often do not survive. For a long time, the entire field of archaeology more or less forgot about them. But in recent decades, a new generation of researchers has begun deliberately looking for the children of the past, and what they have found is changing the way we understand prehistoric life. One of the most magical lines of evidence is the one we began with, the finger flutings. In several caves in France and Spain, the soft clay walls are covered in traces made by human fingers, and careful analysis has shown that children made a great many of them. At one famous cave, the marks appear to have been made by a mix of adults and children together. At another, dating back tens of thousands of years, researchers identified the work of several adults and several children side by side. The picture this paints is striking. These were not solemn, adults-only spaces. Children were brought deep into the caves, into the dark and difficult passages, and they participated, tracing their fingers across the walls right alongside the grown-ups. Whether it was play, teaching, ritual, or all three at once, children were clearly part of the cave experience, not excluded from it. And it is not just finger marks. Children left their footprints too. In several caves, scientists have found the fossilized footprints of children and teenagers, sometimes deep inside the cave systems, far from the entrance. In one famous cave, famous for an ancient clay sculpture of bison, many of the preserved footprints belong to children. This tells us something wonderful. Children were not left behind at the cave mouth. They went exploring into the deep, dark heart of the caves, walking through the same mysterious spaces as the adults. Some researchers imagine groups of kids of different ages venturing in together, much as children everywhere love to explore exciting and slightly forbidden places. The deep caves, it seems, were not off-limits to the young. They were part of the children's world, too. The marks appear to be made deliberately. the handprints and footprints arranged with care, possibly by children at play, pressing their hands and feet into the soft surface, much as a child today might leave handprints in wet cement or sand. If the dating holds, these impressions could be extraordinarily ancient, a tiny, playful gesture by young children preserved across an almost unimaginable span of time. It is a reminder that the simple joy of making your mark, of pressing your hand into something soft and seeing the shape it leaves, is one of the oldest and most universal of childhood pleasures. So what did Stone Age children actually do all day? Here, the evidence, combined with the study of living hunter-gatherer societies, gives us some fascinating clues. And the answer is that childhood in the deep past was a mixture of play and work, of fun and serious learning, in proportions quite different from modern childhood. On one hand, children certainly played. Archaeologists have identified objects that may have been toys, and they tell a charming story. There is a small carved cave lion made from reindeer antler, so worn and polished from handling that researchers think a child may have played with it for years, like a beloved stuffed animal. There are little spinning discs decorated with animals that would have created the illusion of movement as they twirled, an ancient version of an optical toy. And there are broken spear points that show clumsy, unskilled attempts at repair, suggesting that adults gave damaged tools to children to practice on, learning the craft through play. The children of the Stone Age played with toys, just as children always have. But childhood then was not all play, and this is where it differed sharply from modern life. From a young age, children in the deep past were also learning the skills they would need to survive, and often contributing real work to the group. Childhood was, in a very real sense, an education in survival. Studies of footprints at some ancient sites suggest that children were present while adults butchered animals, probably watching, learning, and perhaps practicing their own skills on scraps while staying out of the way. Children likely helped gather plants, collect firewood, fetch water, and in coastal areas gather shellfish and other foods from the shore, where their small, nimble hands and lighter bodies could be an advantage. The world was their classroom, and the curriculum was everything they needed to know to live, how to find food, make tools, read the land, and survive. There was little of the long, protected, leisure-filled childhood we know today. Children grew up immersed in the real work of life, learning by watching, imitating, and doing, all woven seamlessly into the daily life of the group. It was a hands-on, immersive education, and it produced fully capable adults who knew how to survive in a demanding world. We should also remember that childhood in the Stone Age, for all its moments of play and wonder, was often hard and sometimes short. Many children did not survive to adulthood. Disease, accidents, and the dangers of a harsh world took a heavy toll, and infant and child mortality was tragically high by modern standards. The graves of children, sometimes buried with special care, with beads or ochre or small offerings, speak of the love their families felt and the grief they suffered when a child died. These burials are among the most moving discoveries in all archaeology because they show us that ancient parents cherished their children exactly as parents do today and mourned them with the same depth of sorrow. The high stakes of survival did not make these children any less loved. If anything, the fragility of young life may have made each child all the more precious. When you put all of this together, a vivid and deeply human picture emerges. The children of the Stone Age were not so different from children today. They played with toys and explored forbidden places. They were lifted onto shoulders to reach the cave ceiling. They pressed their hands into soft mud for the simple joy of it. They watched the adults they loved and tried to be like them. They learned by playing and played at learning. They were cherished by their parents and mourned when they died. The deep past was not only a world of grim, struggling adults, it was also a world full of children, laughing, playing, learning, and growing, leaving their tiny fingerprints and footprints on the walls and floors of caves where they wait for us still. The next time you see a child press their hand in wet sand or a parent lift a toddler onto their shoulders, remember that you are watching something ancient, a thread of childhood that stretches back unbroken across tens of thousands of years, connecting every child who has ever lived, all the way back to the children of the cave.